Welcome to the Maintenance Community Podcast, a podcast for people who want to learn all things about maintenance and reliability. I'm your host, Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Upkeep. Each week, I'll be meeting with an expert from the maintenance community to take a deep dive into topics sourced from our Slack group. And today, I'm super excited to have Aaron Schultz, also known as AW, here on the show. Aaron holds over 20 years of experience in manufacturing, having worked in multiple Fortune 500 companies like Pepsi and also General Mills, alongside many other manufacturing organizations. Throughout your journey, Aaron, working in this industry, you've gained a ton of insight into facility infrastructure, operation controls, and so much more. I'm super excited to have you on this podcast and ultimately have the opportunity to learn from you.
Well, thanks, Ryan. I'm excited to be here today. This is a great podcast, and I hope I offer some benefits for you.
The way that we always kick this podcast off, Aaron, is have you share a little bit more about your background and how you were first introduced into the field, this niche field of maintenance and reliability, and ultimately why you've stuck around for 20 plus years.
I've been working in maintenance and reliability management for some time now, which may include managing and supporting operations in the warehouse and reliability. The last 15 years has primarily been in continuous improvement or transformation management, where I've led multiple projects in the transformation change or process improvements, either in training or coaching. My experience includes various positions in both operations and maintenance, and most recently it was in project management. I've had a lot of success building plant infrastructures and establishing operator controls that facilitate process improvement. But I give a lot of that back to those that mentored me when I was younger and brought me up. And I think that they were probably some of the best in the business working with them, which has allowed me to give back that knowledge and experience in the maintenance and reliability community.
It sounds like you've really dedicated a big portion of your career towards giving back. And I think even this podcast is a sign of you like trying to share what you've learned throughout the last 20 years and help educate and also promote the industry that we're in. I'm kind of curious, maybe for all of our listeners too, like how you're able to take that mindset and also translate it within your business. So here's what I'm trying to get at. What we talk about a lot on this podcast is how difficult it is oftentimes to drive a reliability culture within your organization. It seems like a lot of people, a lot of businesses are kind of like turned off by this idea of increasing costs and maintenance and reliability. But it sounds like, again, like this focus on education. I have a feeling that big reason there is because you wanted to drive awareness and the importance of this industry, even within your own internal business.
Yeah, so Ryan, I guess it all stands back to, where I want to be successful in building an understanding of the cause of change. When you talk about reliability, it quickly becomes a question about sustainability. It shows that what you work looks good and where the gaps lie. If you walk in an organization and there's a need for transformation or change, it starts with the top of the leadership and you work your way down. In many cases, there's these tools that we've had around for decades now that the next generations, some of them are new to them. Listen to the pain points. Where have they struggled in the past? In a lot of organizations you go into, the stories are the same, but the tools that you're pulling out of the box are a little bit different. And then you help develop a plan that works for them. Change is often hard for people when they're doing something that they believe is in the right way, to look at different options or ways of doing it. It's an easy thing to think about reliability as coming together in the beginning. Keeping it together is progress, and working together is success.
I think you're absolutely right. You hit it on the head. Where I think if you talk about like that idea of reliability, obviously everyone says, yes, that's important. We want to keep our machines running safely, on time, on schedule. But obviously once it comes to like the brass tacks of like, this is what we need to actually do to drive a reliability culture, that's much more difficult. On this journey towards reliability, I think a lot of people ask the question, like, what does success look like? What does a successful, like, reliability-centered organization look like? Aaron, I'm sure you've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, the gray. I'd be curious from you, like, what does success look like from your experience?
I've had the opportunity to see what good looks like. It's simple as having a program that everyone in the organization believes and follows. Success is often ensuring that you have 100% of the employment engaged. Finding ways to get this, from the C-suites into the ones that are cleaning the areas often can be, the challenges of it. But when they're speaking the same at that point, that's when you start to see success. You think about an example like heading up a recycling program or doing it or a SMET event, a 5S storeroom. They don't have to be big, but as long as you're involving everyone else and you're seeing that kind of maturity and involvement, that is when you start to see success. Success is when you've got a plant and you maybe regretted giving plant tours, but later on you're successful when you're encouraging and want to show off what you've done in that facility.
Maybe another question that comes to mind here on you mentioned success is when you want to show it off and be proud of the work that you do. And I totally agree with that. But I also feel like in our industry, we can also fall into this trap of wanting to be perfect too. It's almost like this idea of over maintaining equipment, over focusing on things that may not drive bottom line for the company, and forgetting the overall strategy. I'm just curious, have you seen that before? Is that something that you've run into? This over maintenance, over reliability, over engineering?
Yeah, I have. And this is what's delicate about when you're doing reliability, is knowing what to pull out of it. I'm going to use the word toolbox, but it's essentially you're using all your continuous improvement tools, whether they be Lean Six Sigma or total productive maintenance, and it's knowing how to use them. It's about road mapping it and understanding where you can plan it out and show progress on it. But yeah, you can get lost in the weeds really easy if you're focusing on a project that doesn't show value. Having good key performance indicators and having a goal and an objective for these projects is no different than any other lifestyle that you might apply into business. So that's my one advice when you're going on these journeys and trying to improve everything. You can't improve everything at once.
And what I've noticed from your background too, Aaron, you've done a lot of work with TPM, with RCOs and FMEAs. Is that for everyone? Is that for every single organization? And how do you know if TPM or RCAs and FMEAs are right for you, and when is it right?
I can tell you that probably every project I've done, it's gone off script in some form or manner. But it's important that they scope it right early on and they stick to it. I wouldn't encourage folks, if you don't have the support of the leadership above, but you want to make a change, you're not going to have that type of impact. So, and then the same thing goes true if you've got the leadership and they're willing to invest. Often you got to ask, what can we have as far as short-term gains and long-term gains? Often when you're trying to change a culture, it's a lot of what these tools and reliabilities are is opening their minds to look at things a little bit different. You have to be agile. You have to be willing to bend a little bit on what you want to achieve at the end of the day as an objective. But certainly scoping it plays an important part.
I also have read a few of your posts too, Aaron. You talk a lot about lean thinking and how you deploy that method on this journey towards higher reliability. Curious what your thoughts are. What does that process look like?
Yeah, so lean thinking has been out there for a while. I tend to not use that word lean just because it sometimes distracts the stakeholders or the ones you're working with. Often their heads tend to move toward this is the headcount reduction or layoffs or aggressive run strategies. I tend to use the word transformation or change management or continuous improvement. One of the three I pull out of there. But to answer your question, when you start thinking about lean or when you want to change an organization, you're building on a long-term philosophy that even if you experience short-term goals, there has to be a vision for what you want to see in the future. You need to look at the process, think about the different types of waste that you might have out there, time, inventory, motion, waiting, overproduction, or unutilized resources that you might see. But it's critical that you want to build on top of that team. If you want reliability, you have to invest into it. It's growth and education, making them aware on that. You asked an earlier question about are some facility or some companies ready for this at some points, and the answer is no, they're not, because there's a line to bring them up to speed on that. Throwing them every Lean Six Sigma tool out there is not going to drive process improvement if they don't know how to pull them out and what should be used when. But at the end, you want to turn your facility and the folks within it into problem solvers, because once you start doing that, it's just gonna blossom and open up a lot of avenues they can tap into.
Yeah, I think that's a great dovetail into, ultimately what we were talking about at the start of this podcast, which is really like changing perception, changing culture, transforming culture. So how do you think leadership and upper management can really leverage their past experiences with poor reliability to help transform the culture for the future of the plant and the team?
Tell you what, if they're starting to realize it, there's an easy reason for the cause for change. They've understood it. When it comes to an organization, I've got two things I usually try to do. One, my objective is to make everyone's job easier, which sounds like pulling a 100-pound weight over yourself, but remove some of the business politics, the cloak and daggers. You don't want to blame people. You want to challenge the process. We also can't fix what we can't measure. Having measurable key performance indicators are critical. And then the second part is usually what I tell folks is that part of what I want to do is I want to work myself out of that job, which is a goal of anyone working on transformation and continuous improvement. When they don't need you anymore, you've scoped the project well, the stakeholders are bought in, and you're starting to see those lagging indicators show promise. But knowing it can occur without having that leadership support.
What's a technology or transformation that you're most excited about in the maintenance reliability space?
Something that it's part of what I'm devoting my time to is failure mode effects analysis. It became into as I was building this training program, is that companies like AIAG, the Automotive Industry Action Group, they developed a revision to what was originally developed back in the 60s. And the one gap that I had seen from I'm going to use the acronym FMEA, is that it was only targeted on determine the severity, the detectability, and the likelihood of a failure. But it doesn't march what it looks like as a project level. So they've done some work in the last couple of years, and that work has been instituted in all the automotive industries and then the second and tier suppliers. I'm excited to see some of the results that they start seeing out of it, because I've seen how the program is set up, and it's a vast improvement of what they've had in the past. And I think that this can be reflected in other industries that just follow the conventional FMEA. So I look forward to see what things are coming up the pipeline.
Is there a memory that stands out to you where you had like the biggest win from a reliability project? Like what really stands out to you first thing?
It's when you're doing a walkthrough or a gimbal walk with the frontline employees, and you remember the first day you go in that factory, and their comment is, "What are you doing here?" And then you explain, like, "Well, we already did that. It didn't work, so you might as well leave." But over time, you come in there 3 months, 4 months later, is when they start talking about a process versus blaming somebody else for that. And to me, that's when the light turns on. And that's the most rewarding part about doing reliability is seeing that when these tools they're understanding how they work and how they can be applied. That's one of my one success story that I tend to share, and it's happened multiple times. That's why I stay within there. I still follow it.
On the flip side to that, any failures that you've had? What were some of the learnings, and what can our listeners learn from failures and mistakes that you may have had in the past?
It's easy to say. It's going too fast. Where the business is not ready for it, but pushing these tools in, and then all of a sudden you're not making yourself available to understand, because there's going to be questions along the way of how to bring them up. That was one of my key learnings, and it's one of those things that only happen once, and you learn from it, and you know that you don't put more on them than they can handle. And because in reality, they're making a product, and there's still a business to run there, but they're trying to carry on a process improvement plan to hoist themselves up. But it's important to know that while it's project work for me, it's their daily work for them.
I mean, that's actually huge. It dovetails back to what we were talking about. Is every organization ready for these big levels of change? And I think what I hear from you is like, you can get there, but it's just a matter of how fast and when. Where do you go to continue learning? Where do you go for more educational content and new ideas?
I got to say that past, I was affected by the COVID situation as far as my past role. I've been searching out different avenues. LinkedIn's great for reaching out to the communities, and certainly your organization offers great ways to network in and ask those questions. I don't really have that smoking gun answer for you, but I will share it's great if you can ask a good question. There's going to be a lot out there that are going to answer it back and ask a further question. So that's probably one of my learnings of that.
All right. Aaron, thank you so much for being on this podcast with us here today. If our listeners want to follow you on your journey and connect with you, what's the best way for that?
LinkedIn at AW Schultz. Also, my website at Visual Management Group and cmrpexam.com.
All right. Thank you again, Aaron, for joining us. Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to today's episode of the Maintenance Community Podcast. My name is Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Upkeep. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm super active. And lastly, you can find me and also Aaron in the Maintenance Community Slack group. You can feel free to follow up, ask any questions from today's episodes, or suggest future topics. You can sign up at upkeep.org. And I hope to connect with all of you soon. Until next time, thank you again, Aaron.
Thanks, Ryan.